you notice, as we have in past years, that we display some panels from the Names Project, the World AIDS Quilt, in the lobby, as well as the panels that have been made by Colgate people, I think it was a good 6 years ago, and we put them up each year. And each year, like in the past, we like to invite special guests or guests in to bring some poignancy to the HIV and AIDS crisis, not just today, but learning through history so that history doesn't repeat itself. The LGBT Gay Network is a tremendous resource in helping to find these folks who in many ways have dedicated parts of their professional, personal life into AIDS awareness and HIV awareness and education. So today we have two special guests with us. First, Doug Harris, the producer and director of the acclaimed documentary Out, the Glenn Burke story, and Eric Sherman, who shares an interest in the same story, the author of the book Out at Home, the Glenn Burke story. Glenn Burke is a former center fielder for the LA Dodgers and the Oakland A's. He played in the major leagues for about 5 years. This was in the 1970s, late 70s. And in '77, he participated in the World Series against your own hometown, New York Yankees. He made history by becoming the first Major League Baseball player to announce publicly that he was gay, and then later died of AIDS-related complications at the very young age of 42 in 1995. So 2 decades after his death, Major League Baseball recognized him at the 2014 All-Star Game for being a pioneer for gay athletes in national sports. Doug Harris has brought Burke's story to life in film. So please join me in welcoming Doug and Eric. We're delighted to have you here.
Glenn Burke playing center field tonight. His first World Series appearance. He takes the first pitch in the World Series from Don Gullett for ball 1.
I would describe Glenn as like the glistening mirror ball at a discotheque when the light hits it, and all of these different reflections and colors flash all over the room.
It is not uncommon these days for someone who is in the public eye to come forth and admit that he or she is a homosexual. But it is fairly uncommon when that person is a Major League Baseball player. I'd like you to meet Glenn Burke right now.
Little looper out to center. Burke there. Game's over. Dodgers win a pressure game.
Were you traded from the Dodgers to the A's because you were gay?
I'm not sure.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Now 3 games to 2 in New York. The World Series goes on back to Yankee Stadium Tuesday night at 8 Eastern Time.
I've been around a lot of charismatic guys, a young Magic Johnson and Kobe and all these guys, but just in terms of personality, I've never been around anybody who could light up a room the way Glenn could.
I'm a homosexual. And then I said to myself, I used to shower with this guy almost every day.
Baseball wasn't prepared for Glenn Burke. He was a pioneer.
I interviewed him on and off about maybe a year before he died. And even though we had to take breaks because of the pain and the tears, the crying, I said to him, Glenn, okay, we put in 2 or 3 days. We don't have to go on. You don't have to do this.
The best. The best of work. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all right.
This is overwhelming.
My experience with Glenn dates back to when I was a kid growing up in Berkeley and actually idolizing Glenn Burke. And so when I was asked to produce and direct this documentary film, it was really an honor for me, because very seldom do you get to tell a story about somebody not only that you idolize, but that you were friends with. And I kind of would like to have Eric come up with me because we're kind of doing this as a team today. Eric has a special relationship as well with Glenn. So I'd like to introduce Eric Sherman.
Well, thank you. I would just like to say that, and I'd like to start off by saying that whenever I think of Glenn, I think of what the great baseball commissioner who used to work right down the street and the former Yale president, A. Bartlett Giamatti, used to say about baseball. It breaks your heart. It's designed to break your heart. It begins in the spring when everything begins again and blossoms in the summer, filling our afternoons and evenings. But then when the chill of rain comes, it stops, leaving us to face the fall alone. And you know, I always felt that Glenn, his fall came way too early. The Dodgers offered Glenn a significant amount of money to get married, and Glenn's response was, "I guess you mean to a woman." The Dodgers at that time and throughout the years have maintained this pristine image in baseball. You know, right down to their beautiful white and blue lettered uniforms. They draw 3 million fans a year. And back in those days, they didn't want fathers bringing their kids to a ball game and having a gay center fielder. They thought that would be bad for business. So fast forward all these years later, why hasn't a player came out? You're starting to see it now in the minor leagues. You have a couple of minor league players that have come out and have gotten support. And you know, I think it's in great debt to your film.
You don't realize that making $60,000, $70,000 a year, which is probably what he made at that time, which was a lot of money, how hard that is to make in real life.
He ran out of money, you know, and then he got involved with drugs. His partying escalated, and his drug use escalated.
He had to try to find a way to kind of ease all these pains, physically, psychologically, emotionally, financially. There became a lot of things that, you know, he had to address in his life that he hadn't had in the past, and I'm sure he hadn't even contemplated when he was younger.
The leg that he had that got hit when he was in the city got broken in 3 places, and they put a rod in there. And Glenn, they were supposed to replace it, and he never went back to get it replaced. And so that leg was rotting.
I was on Gallery Street where the theaters are, and there was a pawn shop. What caught my eye was there was this ring, and it was Glenn Burke's championship ring. And number one, it was a heavy piece of jewelry, and if I remember right, with 1 diamond in it. But just seeing it there gave me a saying something's not right with Glenn.
Glenn was heavily involved in the drug culture at the time. And, you know, people that are caught up in the drug culture oftentimes tend not to take care of themselves and do things that they really need to do. And that's a tough situation. I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic myself. And, you know, I know, I understand. I'm celebrating my 21st year in recovery this year. And as his sister expressed in her interview for the story, that Glenn was supposed to, you know, go get the rod replaced in his leg, you know, and he didn't do that. And, you know, that could have been during the time when Glenn was out there in his drug use.
Some guy came to me one Sunday, he used to play with the Cardinals, but he came to me and he said, "Hey Marv, what happened to your friend?" I was like, "What friend?" And I knew who he was talking about. He said, "Glenn." I said, "I don't know, what happened?" He said, "Well, my wife, she works for the health department. And she said that some guys had contacted this gay disease. They used to call it a gay disease. And they said that he was one of the ones that had contact with them." And I was like, oh.
You know, actually, when Glenn got hit by the car and went over to the city, and they were looking at some of the paperwork on there, and Joyce had said something about the blood count or whatever and stuff. And I think that might have been our first inkling into the fact that he probably had HIV.
I wasn't terribly surprised because, as I said, you could kind of see a shift in Glenn. Some of the activities started to become a little more seedy, you know, and as you start falling further down that line, you know, you're going to get into a high-risk area.
And then I remember one day I was at the stadium, Candlestick, and this guy came down weighing about 100.5. And he's looking great. He said, "Johnny B, I recognize the voice, but I didn't recognize the person."
Back then it was a death sentence. 99% of people who got AIDS back in the early 80s and died. So it was a death sentence. So thus, once that sentence is given, then all you want to do is, I guess, is try to feel good.
When it comes to the AIDS virus, the Oakland A's really stepped up to the plate to help Glenn out. And Major League Baseball had a program that Joe Garagiola ran here out of New York. It was the Players Assistance Program that I believe facilitated the help for Glenn. And that's a testament to Major League Baseball for athletes that are having problems and stuff like that.
The pain at the end, I think I was having to give him, like, you know, morphine for the pain and stuff. He had depleted a lot. He was very frail.
And I remember asking Luther one day, because I know a lot of people were coming by there and, you know, bring crack so he could smoke and hang out and talk to him. And I asked Luther, I said, "Listen, I've known you all my life. How do you feel?" And I have to ask you, how do you feel with me bringing crack to Glenn to smoke because it took some of that pain away? And Luther said to me, "It doesn't bother me. Whatever's giving my brother some type of relief, I'm okay with it."
Anybody dying of that disease, give them whatever in the heck they want. Heroin, morphine, crack, if it'll put them out of their misery temporarily, whatever, give them what they need. I can understand why Glenn was needing to get out of his own skin and the pain he was in.
We were doing a tribute for Glenn Burke, and it was going to be the last time that the public was going to get a chance to see Glenn. And this was, you know, shortly before he passed away. Eric came out from New York. It was a tribute for Glenn. And I was charged with coordinating the tribute in Oakland. And I had to communicate and contact with Glenn during the time. And so I had to go over to Luther's house, sit down with Glenn and Luther and coordinate this event. And I had just got out of rehab. So Glenn offered me, you know, some crack. Eric's sitting there with the tape recorder working on the book. Okay? And so I told Glenn to put it out, you know, that I had just got out of rehab maybe a month prior, you know. And so Glenn told me, "You're just gonna have to leave and come back in a couple hours when I'm finished." And that was a true test for me, because that was a point in my life that I could have caved in and went right back out with not even a year under my belt. And I chose to leave. You know, at that time I chose to leave because the temptation was grueling.
We want to say thank you for sharing the important story about your friend. This is something that made it especially touching for us. I mean, the information is important, but the way in which you brought us that information was through eyes that no one who wasn't a friend of that individual could do. So thank you for that. I know you have another work coming.
Yes.
You're working on something else?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what it is?
Sure. I'm fortunate that I'll be working on another baseball film. And the film is called Called Up. And it's about Major League Baseball's first African-American umpire. And he actually got called up to the major leagues after toiling for 15 long years in the minor leagues. He finally got his call up to Major League Baseball in 1966. And so we're working diligently on putting this film together in time to possibly have it completed for the 50th anniversary of Major League Baseball's first black umpire.
But thank you for coming. Anything else? Thank you, Rod. Rod again. Rod never ceases to amaze us year over year in terms of who he brings to us for this occasion.